Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Episode of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, here with Keith Myers, and we're going to talk Seahawks roster day, a few other things, and coming together after a bad playoff loss a week ago. It's good to talk again and just kind of get the offseason rolling with you. So
yeah, last week was kind of our cathartic, get out all of the frustration. And apparently we did a fantastic job of it, because within 5 minutes of being done recording, the Seahawks fired Brian Schottenheimer, and we had to jump back in and re-record there. So that was entertaining. And well, we can go ahead and start there if you want. Like, the Seahawks are still without an offensive coordinator.
Yeah. So you've had a week to kind of digest that whole situation with Brian Schottenheimer. Was it the right move? Was it the right timing? Russell Wilson kind of came in and gave a little interview after that, and kind of gave his tepid support for Brian and wished him well. He was a great guy, all that kind of stuff, but he wanted to have a little bit of input as to who the Seahawks were going to choose heading forward. All those things are kind of out there still. And it just seems like it's a big kind of puzzle, and it's not quite put together yet. What are your thoughts overall?
Well, he said that he wanted some input, and Pete Carroll came out and said, yeah, he's going to have input. He's going to be a part of the process. So it's kind of nice to see. I mean, Wilson's going to have a say in who his next boss is.
I think obviously, right?
Yeah, and he should, honestly. He's the star quarterback. He's been around for a while. He's been in the MVP talk there for a while this last season and all of that. Like, he's a guy that he's also, 32, and he's only got probably 3 or 4
this is
top years left.
Most consequential hire other than John Schneider in the franchise history, I think, because of the position it is, and the timing of Russell Wilson's career and of Pete Carroll. You and the windows is seemingly open for this franchise for a Super Bowl. The roster is not devoid of talent. You would think that this would be a very important hire. Yeah,
and so Pete Carroll wants a certain, he wants to attack teams. He wants to dictate to defenses what they have to do. He wants to do that by running the ball, but and playing to the strength of his roster and his quarterback. But he doesn't just want to run the ball. I know people are like, oh, he wants to run the ball 80% of the time. No. He wants to use the running game to force teams to play against the run and have run stuffing defensive linemen in there at times.
And so that way safety's up.
Yeah. And so that Wilson can operate with some more time and have some more opportunities downfield. And it becomes one of those things where he wants the running game to support everything that Wilson does well.
Yeah.
And
he does a little wacky this year. We passed the ball about 60% of the time, and we ran 40% of the time. And I think Pete would like to see that closer to a 55-45 split.
Yep.
Maybe not quite 50-50, but 52 to 54 to 46 to 48% run, I think is a nice blend. You're still going to throw in first and second down if you're doing it right on
because you're
downs and so forth.
If you're doing it right, you're going to be in 2nd and 2 and have opportunities to run the ball for a first down. And so you're going to get your runs in, and you're going to you're going to dictate to the other team that they are going to have to do things to stop the run. They have to defend the run, which means, you can't defend the run in the pass at the same time. So.
I agree with everything that's been said. I disagree with, the Twitter crowd who's against, Pete Carroll on this and let Russ cook, all that kind of stuff. It's just a better offense, the better scheme. We all realize, I think, hopefully, that Brian Schottenheimer had serious shortcomings when it came to the scheme, when it came to calling plays, when it came to creativity, keeping defenses off balance, and that was very evident against one of the best defenses in the NFL in the Los Angeles Rams. And
yeah, but look what happened
the following week. In our division. Yeah.
Look what happened the following week when the Packers just picked that same defense apart.
Absolutely.
And
just gave us a blueprint.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is, it's the same blueprint that you and I talked about on the show before and after all three of the Rams games this year.
Absolutely.
It's run the ball, short passes.
Yeah. Quick tempo,
get the ball out of Russell's hands, and then take your shots because you're going to have opportunities. And that's not what Seattle did. Seattle went out and they dropped Russell straight back and had him hang in the pocket for 5 seconds and try and throw the ball deep to DK Metcalf over and over and over again. It didn't work. And it's not how you're going to be a defense like that. You got to have something that's going to be quicker. And then, get the ball out of Russell's hands, get him thinking about that, mix in some runs, some power runs, get him thinking about that, and then take those shots downfield.
So Brian Schottenheimer's gone. Seattle's going to have a new offensive coordinator.
Yep.
We've got some names on a list. Seattle's been in contact with quite a few folks, some experienced. Most of them have been experienced head coaches, offensive coordinators. Why don't we run through the list just really quick and get everybody updated?
Well, the most interesting name for me would be Peterson from Philadelphia, who wants to be a head coach, but does not look like Doug Peterson's going to get an option or an offer. He's originally from Ferndale up here, so he's local, and just having him come in and be that play caller. He likes to run the ball. He likes to tight end stuff. Was a fantastic play caller, which is why he got the Philly job as a head coach.
It's under Andy Reid, quarterback at Green Bay. He's got a Mike Holmgren connection. Had a year there in Green Bay with John Schneider in a lower end, front office position there. There's a lot to like about Doug. He's a good guy. Definitely had a falling out there in Philadelphia, but took him to the Super Bowl in 2017.
Yep.
Kind of manufactured a win there with their backup quarterback.
I think that he is underrated as a coach. I mean, he has done I think he did a great job until this year.
I think a lot of it is Carson Wentz. I'll just be completely honest. I think Carson Wentz kind of had a mental break in football this year, and it really had a detrimental effect on his play and on the team and on the coach, obviously, in the end.
I will say that so he is one. Another one would be Anthony Lynn, who was the Chargers coach.
And Seahawks have talked to both these guys.
They have, and they've talked to Adam Gase, the former Jets head coach, which I would hate to see because
I think that's the consensus.
he hasn't been good. His offenses have been bad.
Regardless of what he's like as a play caller, I just think managing human beings, he's not good.
Yeah, and specifically one. Jamal Adams and the star safety for Seattle, and he really did not get along, did not see eye to eye. He would take that he would basically want out of Seattle if Seattle hired Gase.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't even understand like the reach out or the interest at all, just based on everything we know outward. Now, of course, Pete has got relationships all over the league. He's obviously knows way more inside information than we are privy to regarding coaches and personalities and the reasons for people getting fired and cut and behavioral issues, all that kind of stuff. So with all that said, I just don't understand that particular choice if it were to happen.
So I will say this: I don't think any of those three will end up. being here. And it has nothing to.
The list is getting pretty short.
True, but the reason why I say I don't think any of them will end up here is because it's simply financial, because all three of them are under contract with a previous team. Right now they've been fired, so it's not like the Seahawks would have any kind of compensation or whatever. But the way these contracts work is there are offsets, and so if like Peterson's due $6 million this year to not coach for the Eagles off of the extension that he signed after the Super Bowl win. So if the Seahawks hire him, let's say they pay him $1 million a year to be a coordinator, which would be pretty high paid for a coordinator, he would only make $5 million from the Eagles and $1 million from Seattle this year, because that offset, right? So he gets paid $6 million a year whether he works for Seattle or no one. He may decide to work for no one and take a year off because he's going to get paid either way. And the same is true for Gase, and the same is true for Anthony Lynn. And that works against Seattle in trying to bring one of those guys in.
Right.
If any of them, because Peterson has that Super Bowl win, he doesn't need to. For a guy like Anthony Lynn, he might want to just to come in, work with Russell Wilson for a year, be made to look good as an offensive coordinator again, and then start looking for another opportunity to be a head coach.
Well, there's another opportunity right here in Seattle, in 3 years.
True.
And so that might be some sort of an incentive as well, at least in the back of somebody's mind, I would think, and an opportunity here locally. Okay, so those three names, maybe unlikely. Peterson seems to stand out the most in that group. How about another little group of coordinators out there that Seattle's been tied to?
Well, okay, so another one would be Pep Hamilton, a guy who I think Seahawks fans should be familiar with because he's been around the organization at other times. Run game, specialist kind of guy.
He's the ex-QB coach from the Chargers, right?
Yeah. And so
he was under Anthony Lynn.
Yes. And so he'd be taking a promotion into this, but he's a guy that he's been a quarterback's coach. He's been a run game coordinator. He knows offenses. And I think he
spent a year as an offensive coordinator, I think, for Stanford, back in 2015 or something like that, right?
Yep. And so he's a guy that can, he's an interesting name and one that I would keep an eye on because he definitely has a chance to come in and take that role and roll with that. And then the other name that for me that probably makes the most sense would be a guy who's already in Seattle. And that would be passing game coordinator Dave Canales. He turned down an opportunity to go be the OC in Vanderbilt University to stay in Seattle. And so now he would have an opportunity to take that promotion and start working towards an eventual head coaching job here in a few years. So that's an interesting one. I mean, like I said, he's the passing game coordinator, which basically
would make Russell Wilson happy.
Yes, it would. But he
is the best person for the job?
Is he? I don't know.
And it's hard to know because
it's hard to know because
he's never called plays.
Yep.
That's a big responsibility. He's never, we just don't know enough about him to understand what he would bring, independent of what he's already doing in the passing game.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume somebody like that would have an offensive assistant to kind of help with the run game coordination along with him, just because it might be just too much for one person with not enough experience to handle the whole thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is we don't know how involved he was with the game planning and that kind of stuff, or was his job mostly teaching, right? And Shotty came up with the game plan, and then his job was to get that game plan out to the other coaches and to the players and make it happen. And from what we've heard about the inner workings of Seattle's coaching staff, it does sound more like that. Like, yeah, he was the passing game coordinator, but that didn't mean he did forward thinking plans. It was more,
yes,
okay, we have the plan, now let's go implement it.
He
And that
hasn't
was
been
his job.
responsible for diagnosing defenses. Now, of course, any coach at that level in the organization is going to be in film study constantly with other teams, et cetera, bringing new ideas, diagnosing plays, et cetera. So he does have some of that, but again, it's just one of those things. You just have to trust the process with Pete Carroll on that.
And that's the list of names that I have.
I think they had
to.
Tony Elliott from Clemson. I think they talked to him on the phone at one point. Shane Steichen, the offensive coordinator from the Chargers, was mentioned as the first name out. That was now been almost a week and a half since that name came out. Mike Kafka, the quarterback coach at Kansas City, was a name, but I think that was since withdrawn because he's decided to stay with Kansas City. So anyway, the list is somewhat short, and there's not too many exciting names there. So we'll just have to kind of see. We'll just have to just kind of let this thing play out, and we'll talk about it when it happens, I guess.
So can I mention one other coaching thing that had nothing to do with it's not about the Seahawks. Indirectly related to the Seahawks. The Dolphins have promoted Lemuel Jean-Pierre to be their offensive line coach.
That's cool.
Backup center and guard with Seattle, undrafted player, played for 6 years in Seattle, made, I think, 17 starts, played significant snaps in both Super Bowl seasons. Never really got a chance to break into as a starter. Did come in and rescue Seattle the year that they went with a defensive lineman as the starting center, and then cut that short halfway through. He was, on the street and came, basically re-signed and came in and started and saved the team there. But he retired in 2016. Spent a year as an offensive line assistant coach under Tom Cable here in Seattle, then moved with Cable to Oakland / Vegas. Or I guess no, he never did go to Vegas because it was just Oakland, and then he's been with Miami for a year, and then now is going to be their offensive line coach. And apparently he is gained a reputation.
Rise.
Yeah, he's gained a reputation for being a good teacher of technique and skill, and very good communicator, and a guy to watch as someone who's going to climb the coaching ranks fairly quickly. So interesting connection, and great for him. I mean, really nice guy, really hardworking guy that didn't necessarily have the athleticism to ever make a huge impact as a player, but got by being really smart about football. And so it doesn't surprise me one bit that he's being successful as a coach.
Nice. I like that. That's a great story. A couple other coaching things that are completely indirectly related to the Seahawks as well. Robert Saleh, the previous defensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers, took the head coaching position at the New York Jets, leaving the 49ers and the NFC West. Also, the hated defensive coordinator of the Los Angeles Rams, Brandon Staley, took a head coaching job with the LA Chargers out of the division. So we have two defensive coordinators that left the division that kind of at different times owned us. Certainly Staley only had 3 games against us in this division, but all 3 games gave our offense fits. And especially the last one, it was just horrible. And then, of course, Saleh's been great under Pete Carroll, originally as an assistant on the defensive side of the ball, and then as their defensive coordinator there with the 49ers. Did a good job.
Yeah, a couple of fantastic coaches. When the current regime in San Francisco came in, both head coach and general manager, they wanted to bring in Seattle's defense because this was like right at,
That's exactly right.
when Seattle's defense was dominating everybody at the time. And they brought in Saley in order to be, one of those teachers, one of those guys that could bring the scheme, and he has done a fantastic job. And if you look just at this year, at the talent that was on injured reserve for most of the season on the defensive side of the ball, and yet that was still a top 7 defense. And that's even with an offense that was pretty poor and kept the defense on the field all the time. It was still a top defense. Just a fantastic coaching job by him. Great coach, great guy. Good luck. I'm sorry you went to the Jets. But hey, whatever.
But maybe he can turn it around. Who knows?
I don't know if anyone can turn the Jets around. I'll believe it when I see it.
Oh, I would too. All right, so let's get into the meat of the show today, the roster evaluation. We're going to go through the position groups. Our intent here is to establish what the Seahawks need in the offseason to build the roster and be competitive next year. So we're just going to take a look who's under contract, who did a good job, who needs to go. We start off with a cap situation that's kind of tenuous a little bit. Over the cap estimates the cap from the NFL at being $178 million to be set. Although that has not yet been negotiated with the NFL and the Players Association and team owners and so forth. And it's expected that they will do something about that they will, the current cap for 2020 was 195 or 198 million, something like that. There's talk of that remaining the same for 2021, kind of pushing those losses into future years where TV contracts then come into play, and maybe there's really no loss of overall cap that would be, would affect teams and players. So we'll just have to see how that goes. So, but right now, for discussion purposes, let's use the 178 thing just to get it out there. Before Seattle signed all of their futures contracts this week, and we'll go over those, we had a cap of about $13 million. And after all those futures were put on hold, the overall cap for Seattle is around 4.7 million currently. And that's with like 33, 34 players under contract for next year. And we've got a bunch of unrestricted free agents and so forth to go through today. So how do you want to start, Keith?
Well, you're looking at this. I was looking at, so you're saying that the Seahawks have about 4 million in cap space, 4.5. But I was looking at this and an idea of why you and I keep saying that the number's not going to be 178, because if it is, the Saints are $100 million over the cap.
Yeah.
Granted, Drew Brees is probably going to retire, and that's going to save him.
But he still has a dead cap, though.
Yeah, and so but it is going to save them some. The Eagles are, 52 million over the cap. The Falcons are 38. The Packers are 28. The Rams are 26. The Steelers are 32.
Yeah, but that's pretty typical after the season ends.
Not to be that far over the cap, and they haven't re-signed. This is pre. This is they're that far over the cap. They have to cut that much to get down under the cap before the first day of the
either the league is going to have to do something about the cap, or there's going to be a lot of folks out of work.
Yeah,
a lot of mid to lower level veterans in this league will not have room to play.
Yeah, because a lot of, remember that this, like the Seahawks have 26 unrestricted free agents.
Mm-hmm.
That's not abnormal. So if you think of like the Packers, they have, I think it's 23 unrestricted free agents that they are losing.
It'll vary between say 10 and 30 on most teams.
I would say I'm just looking at the Packers because they're they were the 1 seed and that kind of stuff. They have like 23 unrestricted free agents, and they're 28 million over the cap. So they've got to shed $28 million in cap space on top of the 23 unrestricted free agents they're set to lose. So now you're talking about losing another 4, 5, 6 players.
And you still have to build the roster. You still
yes,
have to have 90 folks show up, for camp. And
there's a lot of guys making the absolute minimum undrafted free agent
That's
type.
exactly right. And the league does not want to deteriorate its quality of play to that extent and have, that many folks out of work and lose just that loss of talent. You'll never be able to get that back. And so it's just one of those deals. So I would imagine there's going to be an adjustment, and they're going to push out losses in forward years, at least 2 additional years, so that those losses can be split between a couple of years down the road, and maybe increased in revenue from a pending TV deal this next year will offset that. And so we may not even see a decrease. We just might not see an increase for a couple of years until that kicks in. So, all right. So let's go through the position groups, Keith, and we'll just talk about the roster, talk about some players, what your thoughts are on how they performed this year, what we can expect this next year, and if we should move on or retain, all those kind of questions. So let's start at the top. Russell Wilson, starter at quarterback, 4,200 yards, 40 touchdowns this year. Wheels kind of fell off the last 4 or 5 weeks. There was a combination of things. It just wasn't all on him. But he's the quarterback going forward. There's no reason to kind of question that. I think that looking at the backups, Geno Smith, Danny Etling, and Alex Magoo on the practice squad, they did sign futures contracts. What do you think about that? What do you think about Geno Smith overall?
I mean, basically, I don't see there being much of a change. You're going to have Wilson. He's the guy. Geno Smith is probably not going to be given an opportunity to come be a starter anywhere. So he has to pick where he wants to play and who he wants to play with. And that it's not going to be for starter money or even a starter opportunity. So as a backup, what's the difference? Maybe a backup job where the starter is bad. And so he might get a chance to play more, but
it depends on if Seattle wants to go in a different direction. We've talked about it a long time about the possibility of developing a quarterback in this on this team, and we have yet to do it. And so we did bring back Alex Magoo, which is interesting. They like Danny Etling. Haven't seen either one of them really, so I don't have any idea what we've got there. But Geno Smith, he had an opportunity to come in a little bit this year on some cleanup work, and he looked nervous on his first drive, but kind of came together on the second couple drives he had. So I wouldn't mind having Geno Smith back. It's not going to be very expensive. Seattle's got to watch their cap numbers this year. There's no reason to bring in somebody that's more expensive. So you might as well stick with what you know. All right, running backs, Keith. What are we going to do? This is kind of a big kind of a deal because Chris Carson and Carlos Hyde are both unrestricted. They both are susceptible to injury. Chris Carson missed 4 games. Carlos Hyde missed 7 games. They were both underutilized and underproductive as far as Chris Carson. I think mostly he averaged, 12 carries a game this year, down from 16 the prior year. And it showed in his production. He had 141 carries. Typically in a number one running back in this league, you're going to have closer to 240 as opposed to 140. And he had 681 yards, 5 touchdowns. Carlos Hyde was anemic. DJ Dallas was okay when he had opportunities to come in. He wasn't.
I disagree. I disagree with your evaluation of Carlos Hyde. I thought he was better than what you're giving him credit for.
He had a couple of games where he was pretty decent, and then his yards per carry average in 3 or 4 different games was below 3.
Yeah, but when you're getting 3 or 4 carries and you have to look at
7 or 8 opportunities. He had 7 or 8 carries a game.
Yeah, he was a big, he came back before Carson and had a couple of really big games and made a difference. was a definite upgrade over all the people
I
that the Seahawks had
agree.
been.
When he's healthy, I agree. I just don't know that he was completely healthy at any point.
Yeah, and I just don't think he is the type of running back that is going to be productive when you give him, 5 carries a game. He's the type of running back that needs to be a starter. Now, he doesn't have the durability to be a starter, but at 5 carries a game, you're not going to get much out of him. But at 15, his production level would warrant him to get more. You know what I mean?
Yes.
He gets better with more carries. So I think he was better than you said. He was anemic. I think he was better than that. He wasn't great, but he did pretty well. And yeah, I mean, Carson was underutilized, but when he was healthy and playing, he was great.
Yes. But that's the thing. So now Seattle has to make a decision on that. The running back, the top 10 running back, the bottom 10, the 10th highest paid running back in the NFL is making $7 million a year. Pro Football Focus had Chris Carson ranked as the 15th best running back in the league. So where is he going to get paid? Is he going to go out and find a contract? Is somebody going to pay him to play 12 games a year? And if they give him more of a load, is he going to break down? So I would be questioning whether or not a team is out there is going to give him any money. I see him possibly coming back on a 1-year deal, like a $5.5 million deal to show that he can stay healthy and be productive in the reworked Seattle offense.
Yeah.
That's what I would do if I was both parties. I think Chris Carson's going to have a hard time finding a team out there to pay him $7 million.
Yeah. He's also going that, getting 5.5 is a $5 million a year raise. I mean, this last year he made $616,000, which is
that's below league minimum.
No, it's not. It's not below the minimum because it's his rookie contract for a 7th round pick.
In a fourth year, that would be like 1.2, wouldn't it?
Not for a 7th round pick, no.
Okay, all right.
You're right. I could see them bringing Carson back on a 1-year deal, but I think when you've got Dallas and Penny there already, Hyde's probably gone in order to make room so that Penny gets more carries and Dallas gets more carries. And then, you bring Carson back, or maybe Carson prices himself out of a job here in Seattle and he goes and signs somewhere else. And then the Seahawks go, okay, well, rather than paying Chris Carson $5 million, what if we give Carlos Hyde 2.5 and bring him back?
Missed 7 games. One of the biggest things about being a good running back, especially for a Pete Carroll offense, is availability.
I know.
And it was tough with Chris Carson just missing 4 games, let alone 7. I don't see that getting any better, and the workload would be triple.
Not really, because Rashad Penny would be the number 1 back.
But Rashad Penny hasn't proven anything yet. That would be a tenuous situation for Seattle to enter the year with those 2 running backs as being your 1-2 punch in a offense that Pete Carroll has literally declared this is the priority in the offseason.
Yeah, we'll see.
But they just don't have a lot of money to spend. So either if Chris Carson leaves and Hyde's not back, and you do go with Penny, but you bring in a guy, let's just say Alec Collins is your 3rd guy. I think he maybe deserves an opportunity to come in. And then your number 1 or your number 2 guy is either a draft pick or a free agent signing to replace Carlos Hyde. So you spend like $3.5 million on a back that might be out there that could come in and say, I don't know if Kenyon Drake would take that kind of money, but Todd Gurley's out there. You could probably get him for, 5. Mike Davis is out there. He's 28 years old. You could probably get him for around 3.5. He had a great year this year. There's some other guys out there. Kalen Ballage is 26 years old. Hasn't really worked out in the league. Hasn't had a lot of opportunity. I remember being kind of excited for him in the draft when he was available as being kind of a bigger guy, 225 pounds, 6'1", that could carry the rock. I just think there's some options out there. I don't know that we necessarily need to be married to Chris Carson. You know who else is available? James Conner from Pittsburgh. He hasn't had a tremendous couple years after his rookie year, but he's a guy that you could share a workload with. And I think he'd be very productive for you. He's like 26 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Just some ideas.
Yep.
So, all right. Anybody else that anything that you're concerned about with the way the running backs are made up right now? You've got Travis Homer there. He hasn't really done anything. DJ Dallas.
To me, it comes down to who the offensive coordinator is. Because if you need a guy who can catch the ball out of the backfield and do some things, be more the way J.D. McKissick was a few years ago. Be more weapon.
Dallas could do that for you.
Be more weapon than running back. That might be where you get Travis Homer involved more. But yeah, other than that, I'm not.
Like DJ Dallas in that role better than Homer. I mean, DJ Dallas had 17 receptions for 111 yards and a touchdown.
Very limited
Homer
playing
didn't
time.
have any.
Yeah.
All right. Wide receivers.
You're going to skip fullback, huh?
Well, Nick Bellore, I tell you what, Nick Bellore had the lowest pass block grade I've ever seen on Pro Football Focus of 3.3 pass block grade. Nick Bellore, a 41.6 overall Pro Football Focus grade. I think Nick Bellore's done with the Seahawks. I don't know that he's going to be back. And the reason I say that is I honestly think maybe they have a fullback in 2021 that could actually take a role as a fullback in this offense, and we'll see what develops. But I know like Peterson, for example, uses 2 tight end sets occasionally. He'll use a fullback. Anthony Lynn, I think the same thing. So we'll see how that goes.
The Seahawks haven't had a fullback since Max Strong. I mean, one that's worth writing home about. You know what I mean? And it's been a long time since Max Strong played. Can we get a player at that position to?
I would like that.
Just be solid. I know. Okay, people will say Michael Robinson, and that's probably fair. I should probably include him.
Was a good player.
Yeah. But to me, the last great one was Max Strong. And before that, it would be John L. Williams. Right. That's what I'm hoping that they do is just get someone that you can depend on to pass block, to run block, to do stuff.
Roster, he might as well be a weapon. So if you're going to have a guy on the roster that's going to take up a spot, play special teams, you might as well have a weapon as well on offense.
The 49ers have one in Kyle Juszczyk.
Exactly.
And I would love for Seattle to have a guy like that. Then you can line up all over the field on offense, but he's a fullback and does fullback things on top of that. And
exactly.
I'd love to see that. All
right, wide receivers. We got 3 under contract: Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Freddie Swain. Tyler Lockett is on the last year of a 4-year deal.
Mm-hmm.
He's making $14.9 million. He's actually only like 2.2 million of that is guaranteed. So he's got a huge chunk of money sitting there that the Seahawks could restructure to get some cap savings if they so chose to do and extend Tyler Lockett. So there's an opportunity there.
And I would be happy to see that happen because he's a guy that has been very productive, very good, very steady, had some injury, here or there, but he played through them. And to get him locked up long-term, to drop his cap hit, but also, extend him, that would be nothing but a win for Seattle.
Yeah. It'd be nice to have another outside weapon that had some speed that could stretch the field a little bit and play Tyler Lockett straight from the slot all full time.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, Tyler takes a beating over the middle. It's just brutal. DK Metcalf, he's got 2 years remaining on his deal. He had a great season. Just tremendous, really. Fulfilled every expectation. Yeah. Freddie Swain, brand new rookie this last year, had 13 catches 159 yards and a couple touchdowns. I thought Freddie Swain looked great. I'd love to see Freddie get an opportunity to return some kicks, just to give him more opportunities with the ball in his hands and open space. I think that would be a good thing.
When I was looking at stats, I was surprised that he had 13 catches and not like 20, 25, because it seemed like he was involved more than 13
I think later
catches.
in the season he came on. He really didn't do much in the first half, and then the second half he kind of came on. David Moore. This is a decision that Seahawks will have to make unrestricted at this point. 35 catches, 417 yards, 6 touchdowns. He's kind of one of those guys, though, that that's pretty much what he's going to give you. He's going to give you 35 catches, 500, 600 yards, and 4 to 6 touchdowns year in, year out. He'll disappear on you a few times during the season. He'll show up big time and make big plays for you. I thought there's something going on with David Moore this year as far as like punt returns and so forth. I just felt like he was kind of stuck in quicksand a few times. And I'm not sure if it was an injury thing or if he just got kind of spooked a little bit and wasn't really into it. He got replaced eventually on the return job by DJ Reed later in the year. So what do you think on David Moore? Is he worth the Seahawks bringing back on a 1 or 2 year deal?
I bring him back on a 1 or 2 year deal if it's down near the minimum. And then I would promptly put in a ton of competition to try and take his job away from him, because we know who he is. Hedge. Yeah, you know who he is, and you know you can get by with him, but you also know that he's not going to make the people around you better. He's not going to make the offense better. You're going to get a certain amount of production, and that's it. And so I would say, sure, we can live with that, but we're going to push you, and there's going to be other guys, challenging you for that spot. So
including Freddie Swain.
Yep.
How about Philip Dorsett? Now, here's a guy that didn't see the field at all for Seattle. When we signed him, he was going to be this guy that was going to come in and give us 35 catches, stretch the field a little bit, move the chains. He ended up having foot surgery, was out on IR. The team said that they would like to have him back. I would imagine that there's some sort of reciprocal situation there because, of course, you've given a guy, $2-3 million to come and play. He didn't play it down. He probably feels a little bit of an obligation at least to come back and give it another go.
Well, and he's not going to have a lot of opportunities out there. He didn't play this year.
Right. But he is unrestricted, so the Seahawks would have to give him another contract.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see.
Yep. So there's a bunch of guys the Seahawks have signed on futures deals that are technically on the roster right now, but I don't know if we can expect them to remain on the roster come week 1 of next year.
Right.
John Ursua, Penny Hart, Cody Thompson, Aaron Fuller.
Right.
Yeah. I still think John Ursua needs to be given an opportunity to be that slot.
There's a reason, though, why he has not come up and taken a snap. It's just crazy. I understand they do like Cody Thompson, but we haven't seen him, so we don't really know what we got there. Penny Hart had a couple opportunities. In fact, he was suited for 10, 12 games this year. He was on the roster to play special teams, and he did. I think he had 1 catch, or maybe it was an end around, a run. And he had a couple of tackles on special teams, and that was kind of his deal. So we'll see if he can make a bigger impact, a larger impact with a bigger opportunity. I don't know. We'll see. All right, tight ends, Keith. What do you got on tight ends?
Well, Olsen is probably retired and off to be again a broadcaster.
And I think that's a good idea. To give that guy $7 million was, I think, probably one of John's biggest mistakes of the year.
Yeah, I understand why they did, because you had no idea what was going to happen with Disley and whether he was going to be able to play. And so they really wanted to have that. And, he was pretty good. Was he $7 million good? Probably not. But he did his job, and that was fine. But Will Disley took over and, was the starter and was the guy. He may not have gotten any of the press or any of the notoriety, but he was the guy who got the play, right? He got the run on the field, and he did so mostly as a pass blocker, and as a run blocker. He essentially was right tackle for a chunk of this year in the second half because they weren't getting much out of their right tackle. And so they had stuck Disley next to him and said, "Here, good luck." and Disley did really well with that role. He's such a well balanced player in terms of blocking and as a receiver, and so he could handle it.
Yeah.
Behind him, he's Colby Parkinson. He's going to be your pass catching specialist. The 6'7" rookie who didn't play much this year had that broken foot, so he missed a big chunk of time early in the season, and then just never worked himself into the rotation. And then the only one left on the roster besides that is futures contract guy Tyler Mabry, and no idea who that is. Jacob Hollister is
more of a blocking guy.
Yeah, Hollister is out there as a guy that might come back, but he really did not live up to what he did the previous year. He just was kind of a disappointment this year.
Yeah,
so I don't know what they do with that.
The tight end group was kind of down. I mean, when you combine all their totals, they look okay, but everyone had 24 catches. Like Disley had 24, Greg Olsen had 25, Hollister had 25. They all had 200 plus yards and a handful of TDs. I was a little bit surprised on Disley's production. I thought he would have been a little bit more productive for the Seahawks this year, considering the first 2 years when he was on the field before he got injured, he was ultra productive. And maybe they were just kind of easing him back into the whole running route things and kind of taking it easy on that Achilles a little bit this year. So we'll see how that goes.
That's not what I saw. It wasn't that they were taking it easy on him. It's that they were asking him to block and to do that and just not giving him the opportunities. And I think, and the blocking's the harder of the two jobs. And so to me, it was like, no, he's healthy enough, so we're going to give him this really hard task and ask him to do it. And he did pretty well. But yeah, I mean, all told, with all three of the guys, it was like, kind of. Disley just got the least number of opportunities because he was always asked to block. The other two guys ran a lot more routes.
All right, offensive line. There's seemingly two opportunities on the roster for either new starters or to bring the guys back that we had, but two guys that were starters are unrestricted. Ethan Posick at center, first year at center, and did an admirable job this year, I thought. Fairly even throughout the year.
I thought he played pretty well early. Got hurt.
Yeah.
And then after his injury and he came back, he wasn't as good.
Yeah, Pro Football Focus had a grade on him of 59.8, which is slightly below average, 27th out of 37 possible centers in the league was his ranking. Behind Ethan Posick, we've got Kyle Fuller, who's a restricted free agent this year. Don't know if they will tender him or not. And then Brad Lundblade is a future contract prospect. So what do you do at center, Keith? Do you bring Ethan Posick back on a prove it deal, or do you give him a nice contract? I saw a couple of rankings out there in free agency where he's like the 5th or 6th ranked center in free agency. So he could, in fact, get paid by somebody, but I don't know who.
Given the BJ Finney kind of debacle at trying to find a center outside of the roster and how poorly that worked out for him, I'm in favor of doing what you got to do to bring him back. I guess if he leaves, maybe you just roll with Fuller. I mean, Fuller was a guy that they kept, even though he was suspended to start the year, and then everyone just assumed he was going to get cut. Right. So, maybe you roll with him and try and develop some guys, some younger players. But honestly, I think that you bring back Posick and Fuller and you let those guys battle it out.
Yeah, I think if you bring back Posick, maybe you do him a favor and you get him a really nice left guard to as an addition on this offensive line to help protect him. And Pete Carroll did come out and say that the offensive line was going to be a priority this year to address. You've had Mike Upati there and Jordan Simmons. Both are okay. Upati's a little better when he's healthy, but he missed quite a bit of time. And then Jordan Simmons came in and played well, but he's got an injury history. Don't know if you want to depend on Jordan Simmons going forward to be your guy. He's an exclusive right free agent this year. I would assume the Seahawks will extend him an offer because I think he is a serviceable backup. I just don't believe that he's going to be a starter.
Exclusive right free agent means he either plays for the minimum or he doesn't play at all.
Unless they relinquish that.
That's what I mean. But he either plays for the minimum or doesn't play at all.
Right.
And so he'll be back and get an opportunity. But you're right. I wouldn't roll with him as a starter. The player that's kind of forgotten in all of this would be Jamarco Jones, who the Seahawks relied on at tackle and was kind of a backup there and whatnot, but also played guard and can play everywhere kind of on the line. But he has looked good at times as a guard. He's looked pretty mediocre as a tackle, and I wouldn't be against putting him at guard full time and letting him earn that job.
Interesting. The other guy that's out there that we don't know yet about is still under contract that opted out because of COVID in 2020 is Chance Warmack. Wanted to be able to come back, had not played in 2019, opted out of 2020. So he hasn't played for a couple of years, but he still has a contract. It's an unguaranteed deal. So we'll see if the team decides to move on or not and releases him. But he's another guy that could come in and compete. And then I do expect Seattle, this is probably one of the positions on the roster where I see Seattle going out in free agency and at least getting somebody to come in and compete at left guard, and then possibly in the draft as well to compete. I think our first pick in the draft this year is second round pick number 56. And it wouldn't surprise me if it was a left guard.
Yep. And the only other name out there would be Phil Haynes, who it's now been 2 injury-plagued years where he hasn't played. So much promise coming out of college to be the next dominant Seattle guard, but it just hasn't happened. It just hasn't been able to be healthy. And Damian Lewis kind of took over that mantle of being the best young lineman in Seattle. And Haynes is just there as maybe, and who knows, maybe he does finally stay healthy next year and gets a chance. But until it happens, the team's not going to depend on it.
So tackle wise, Dwayne Brown, he's got 2 years remaining. He's got a 13.35 cap hit this year. However, 11.35 of that is unguaranteed. So there is some room and opportunity there to extend Dwayne a little bit and manipulate that bonus money around it to have a little bit of cap savings if they need it. He was ranked 5th out of 81 tackles, Pro Football Focus. Dwayne Brown still bringing it. Seahawks need him. Because of the lack of first round capital in the next 2 drafts. Brandon Shell worked out this year, probably the best acquisition that John Schneider had in free agency as the right tackle. He's got 1 year remaining on his deal. Cedric Abuahe was serviceable, but he is unrestricted. Marco Jones, you mentioned, he's got 2 years left on his deal. Chad Wheeler, unrestricted, played okay. And then Tommy Champion has a futures deal on the practice squad, essentially. All right. Anything else? Let's move to the defense.
Let's move to the defense.
Defensive line, defensive tackle. Jaron Reed has 1 year left on his deal. It's a pretty bloated deal. It's like $13-something million left on that. And most of it is guaranteed. I think like $7 million of that is guaranteed. So he's definitely going to be back, but he only had a Pro Football Focus grade of 56.5, which I thought was rather disappointing. He gave us some pass rush, but he was horrible defending the run.
He was not good at the beginning of the year. I mean, he had the first 5 or 6 games. he did not play well in any facet of the game. And then he really turned it on as a pass rusher down the stretch. It was part of the reason why Seattle became a good pass defense team, was because of his ability to get pressure up the middle. But yeah, I mean, he had a pretty bad set of games early on, and then never really did much as a run defender. They didn't ask him to be. I mean, he was in a rotation with two very good run defenders. Yeah. And so they didn't ask him to be a run defender. They asked him to get upfield. And so there's that. But
Poona Ford had a great year.
Yes,
Poona Ford earned a grade of 79.8 from Pro Football Focus, the 14th ranked defensive tackle overall in the NFL.
Yep.
Poona Ford, he's a restricted free agent, which means that the Seahawks need to tender him. So the question is, do they use an original round tender, which is undrafted? Do they
that gets them a right of first refusal?
Do they use a second round tender, which gives him like a $3.5 million contract? Or do they use a first round tender, which is like a $5.5 million deal or something like that, right, Keith?
Yep.
That means that if a team decides to extend an offer to him, they have to relinquish a second round pick if it's a second round tender and a first round pick, et cetera. So what do you think they do with Poona Ford?
I think that the second round tender is probably where they're going to go with that. Simply because there's two parts to it. One is, if he signs with someone else, they have to give up a pick, but the Seahawks have an opportunity to match, right? So it's kind of like the old poison pill deal. And where if you match the terms of the contract, and then you get to keep them. And maybe they do that with the original round tender just for that right of first refusal. So a team goes out and signs them to whatever contract, and they go, okay, we'll pay you that. And they keep him. I would say it's probably going to go with the second round tender, because if he signs just a massive deal and they go, whoa, that's just too much, we can't, like, our cap space doesn't let us, then they still get a second round pick back. So that's kind of where I would expect them.
Yeah, I don't think they would insult him with an original round tender. All right, and then Brian Monet's a exclusive rights free agent, and then Cedric Lattimore has a future deal, and Miles Adams a future as well. So those are two run stepping defensive tackle types.
Yep.
Defensive end. LJ Collier's got 3 years remaining. Rasheem Green has got a year. Benson Mayowa is unrestricted this year. I need to make a decision if they want to bring him back for competition. Alton Robinson had a great year. 3 years left on his deal. Carlos Dunlap has a year left, but it's
$14 million cap hit, $10 million, $10 million of it in salary, and unguaranteed, no dead cap if they cut him. They won't. I don't expect them to cut him unless they absolutely have to.
They would have to restructure this. This number's too big for the team to just sit there and let it sit when they could leverage it.
Yep. I think that, and I think that's what they do. I think they either ask him to take a pay cut and restructure it that way and get his cap number from 14 down to like 7, or they extend him. So then instead of 1 year left, he's got 2 years left, combined maybe 16 million total, so 8 per, with 14 million of it guaranteed. So it's basically taking, hey, the money you would earn this year, we're going to guarantee that amount over 2 years, and you're just not going to make much more than that.
Well, and I don't, Carlos Dunlap came in and he really did make an impact and make a difference. And he made other players be able to play better. But Carlos Dunlap received a grade of 61.9 on Pro Football Focus. And the only reason, and I'm not, I don't want to.
How much of that was his time with Cincinnati though? That's because when he was with the Bengals, he just straight up was like, he wasn't trying to help them win. He was trying to get traded. And then when he came into Seattle, he was actually trying to help Seattle win. And you could tell the difference. He was the player that he'd been the rest of his career. So I would want to see a breakdown of
Sure.
where that grade was earned. Because my guess is he was somewhere in the 40s in Cincinnati, and he was somewhere in the 70s in Seattle.
Jonathan Bullard, unrestricted. Darrell Taylor. It's got either 3 or 4 years remaining. I don't know if this last season was accrued. I don't believe it was. So he could have 4 years remaining under team control.
He does.
Sounded like he came on at the end there, had some great practices. Pete Carroll spoke about that a little bit, just to add to the pile next year. So we'll see how that goes. Stephon Sullivan has 3 years. Don't know what we've got there. DeMontre Moore, unrestricted. Brandon Jackson, unrestricted. Don't imagine those two coming back unless somebody like DeMontre Moore comes back for a league veteran minimum type deal, just because that's, Seattle needs to have those guys on the team, and a familiar face is sometimes the best. Linebackers, Bobby Wagner, 2 years remaining on his deal. Number 2 ranked overall linebacker in the NFL, Bobby Wagner. KJ Wright, the number 8 overall linebacker in the NFL, Pro Football Focus. Great year, KJ Wright at strong side linebacker. He is unrestricted though.
Yeah.
He played out a $9.5 million deal, APY. What do you do with KJ Wright? Can you afford KJ Wright?
I don't know. You try. You really try. I mean, he made the switch from weak side to strong side. The strong side fits his athletic profile better at this stage in his career, and it showed. He just really blew up and had a great year, and it just it's one of those things. He just allows people around him to be better. And I would try and pay him. I'd try and keep him. I'd obviously try and pay him less than he made this year. And it might even be a situation where you go, look, for all intents and purposes, we probably should have cut you and saved that money, but we didn't. We stood by you. So give us a break this year. And see if maybe he'll take that. Or maybe you sign him on a 2-year deal and the first year is really cheap and the second year is not. Just to keep his cap number down. But also if he does fall off and have the injury problems he had the previous couple of years, and then you're just be done. But I'd say you got to make an effort to get him back. He was that good. He was worth bringing him back.
I agree. All right. So that means you have to make decisions with other roster spots, and we'll see how that goes. Cody Barton, mostly special teams. Ben Burkervin, same. Bruce Irvin went out early in the season. He's unrestricted. Don't know if they'd bring him back or not. Might be worth a look. I wouldn't do it for $5.5 million. I might look at, a couple $1 million with a little bit of guaranteed money in there for him if he wants to keep playing. Shaquem Griffin is restricted. What do you think about Griffin as the linebacker in the linebacker group, and what he brings to the team? And do you put a little tender on him?
I put the original round.
Fourth
round. And yeah, just no one will sign him and give up that for him. He's been a great special teams guy and that kind of stuff. And he's a guy that can play a little bit here and there. He's got tremendous athleticism and speed, but just has never really done much when he got on the field with the defense. He's had a couple opportunities over the years and just never really lived up to much hype, except for, as a pass rusher, not this year, but the year before, in the second half of the year. And even then he would get washed out of on plays and just not really be effective. And then suddenly he would, make a play and have an impact. So it was very inconsistent is what I'm saying. And so I don't know what you do with that, whether you find that to be value or whether you let him go. It might be one of those things where, hey, we'll, in order to bring back his brother, it's part of it's a package deal, right? Where Quill only signs if Seahawks offer Keem a deal, and that's a possibility.
It is possible. There is, either a handshake agreement or whatever. Secondary, start with the safeties. Jamal Adams came in, made an immediate impact, got hurt, came back, played even better. As far as a pass rusher is concerned, as far as a strong safety is concerned, Pro Football Focus has him as a grade of 62.7, which is right in the middle of the pack as far as strong safeties around the league are concerned. That includes the 86.1 pass rush grade that he had. So he was in the 50s, lower 50s in coverage and in defending the run. So what do you do with a guy like that? He's kind of an enigma. He's not really playing the position the way that you would expect and want somebody to play a strong safety position traditionally. But he gives you a lot of big play type potential.
He does. He's all over the place. He's a great run defender. He's a great pass rusher. He's not great in coverage. You know that. That's who he is. You know who else was great in those other, in other roles, but not great in coverage? Cam Chancellor. You can work around it. You just have to have a coordinator that's going to use them, design, everything set up to take advantage of the things he does well.
And they did that in the second half.
Yeah. And he, set the NFL record for sacks as a defensive back and, made a lot of plays. And when asked to cover downfield, he made a bunch of mistakes. And okay, let's maybe not have him cover downfield. And I think going into next year, you're going to be okay with that because you're going to get the next guy you're going to talk about back from injury. And that would be Marquise Blair, who can do those other things and be your third safety, your nickel back, but also your strong safety if all three of them are in there. So that way Adams can be more of a rover and show up in all sorts of different places. And Blair can be more of a traditional strong safety. And so you can work with it and do a lot of different things there. And I think that the Seahawks didn't do enough of that this year with Ryan Neal and letting him be the strong safety in order to open up Jamal Adams to do more of the fun stuff.
So Jamal Adams got a pretty big number. It's all unguaranteed, $9.86 million. It's off the back end of his rookie deal. He's going to get paid by Seahawks or somebody going forward. Probably going to end up being north of 15, probably 17 million a year. Is he worth 17 million a year for the next 4 years with Seattle? Now you could work a deal, at least if you were to give him a contract extension where you could make the first year cap hit a little bit more palatable for the Seahawks. But going forward, it'd still be pretty expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want that player? Is that player worth it to you in your defense?
17's a hard number for his safety for me to justify any safety. You make it 14 or 15 and I do it. You start to get 17, 18 and I struggle with the idea that any safety is going to be worth that.
I mean, you could bring in a guy like Keanu Neal, instead to play your, safety, strong safety spot. John Johnson from the Rams, 26 years old. You could probably pay him like $6 million.
Well, you've got Marquise Blair on the roster and Ryan Neal on the roster, and both of them played well as as a safety. So
right.
You can have a more traditional safety if you want that.
That's just a lot of money is going to be tied up there.
Yeah, the thing about Adams though is he's not just a safety. He's a pass rusher. He's a linebacker. He's a slot corner at times. He does so many other things.
Would you take a 2021 first round pick, a low first round pick, like top 10 or top 15, and a 2022 either first or second round pick for Jamal Adams with the cap savings?
Absolutely. In a second. If you
think there would be a team out there that would do that?
If if you, I wouldn't need, it wouldn't even need to be a top half of the draft, our first round. If you're talking about like the 22nd pick, and then, a third round pick the following year or fourth round, I would still do it. And the reason why I do it is, one, the team lacks draft picks, and they need them. And two, the cap savings. And I think that you can go find a dynamic player with that money at a position where they're going to be able to make more of an impact on every play, whether that be a cornerback or a defensive end.
Yeah. I mean, how important would a lockdown corner be in this defense?
Mm-hmm.
With our emerging pass rush, even if you take Jamal Adams out, you got other opportunities for maybe Jordan Brooks to come on, and, in time and so forth. It's an interesting situation for me. I agree with you. I think that I would move on from Jamal Adams, even though I've wavered during the season. I saw Jamal Adams play. He got hurt. I was like questioning it at that point. I was like, okay, he's not very good in coverage. He doesn't really play the traditional strong safety role for the Seahawks. We have him in a hybrid situation. The defense is really designed around people being in specific spots and knowing where everyone's going to be all the time, kind of a disciplined defense. And then he came on and provided all those sacks when we really needed him. And I was like, yeah, there's just no way that we could let him go. And a couple of weeks after the season now, I'm questioning that and looking at the cap, and I'm looking at the long-term financial obligation that we would have to sink in, and having him play an untraditional role in that defense the entire time, and having to kind of scheme around him a little bit, and then realizing maybe what we could have in his place and spending that money in other areas. And I'm just not sure if it makes sense moving forward to sink that much into him.
Thinking about this 2 years in a row, right? Who would you rather spend $17 million on, Jamal Adams or Jadeveon Clowney?
No, well, yeah, Adams. He doesn't have that injury history.
Well, and Adams, he made a bigger impact.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Right.
So even though he doesn't play a position which is traditionally thought of as this impact position like defensive end, he had a bigger impact. He was a bigger playmaker. He was a bigger thing for offenses to have to worry about. I'd spend the money on him first. But, what if Von Miller, who didn't play this year because of an injury, becomes available because Denver decides not to pay him coming off that injury and whatnot, and you're like, okay, well, we can sign Miller on a deal for 10 or 9, somewhere in that range, but we have to lose Adams to do it. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, you can, 17 million is a lot. You can spread that money out over a couple of guys and actually end up with a more balanced, deeper defense. But at the same time, he made he made a huge impact when he played early, even though the defense was bad. Then he got hurt. Then he came back. It was a part of the reason why the defense became really good when he came back.
I mean, there's a lot of cornerbacks out there: Kevin King, Kevin Johnson, Terrence Mitchell, Cameron Sutton, Desmond King's out there, John Johnson at safety. There's a lot of players you can invest in to help your team and help your defense overall than just one player with that much money. And so Seattle may find themselves in a situation where they just are backed into a little bit of a corner in a sense, with the cap and with draft picks, and kind of leveraging those picks over the 3 or 4 years that you would have them under contract, and then looking at Jamal Adams as one single player with that much tied up. They may just decide to move on and see what they can get. And I wouldn't be opposed to that. I wouldn't be opposed to keeping him either and giving him a nice contract, because I think he will affect your team and make you better. But I think 3 or 4 cumulative players for $17 million might be a better deal. And we saw that a little bit with Jadeveon Clowney situation. Okay. Quandre Diggs on a 1-year deal now at this point, $5.5 million. It's all unguaranteed. They may decide to extend him to kind of manipulate that number a little bit. Ugo Amadi had a great year, I thought, this year playing the slot. 2 years left on his deal. Marquise Blair, 2 years. And then Leno Hill and Demarius Randall are unrestricted. Cornerback.
I can't imagine Leno Hill being back. His time in Seattle is over. Yeah. I mean, this was his opportunity to come in.
He's the defensive version of Haynes.
Yeah, this was his opportunity to come in and finally stay healthy, and because he's a guy that hasn't been bad when he's played, but just has never stayed healthy. And okay, go take advantage of it, and he couldn't. He couldn't stay healthy, and he was out again for most of the year, and I think he's done.
So Seahawks are looking at a potential fairly decent turnover in the cornerback room this year. Shaquille Griffin is unrestricted. He's been our starter for the last 4 years, and now has the opportunity to either come back to Seattle or start for another team. We have to make a big decision there. Does the team, where does he fall as far as salary demands? And how does Seattle value him? And that'll be an interesting question. One of probably the top 3 unrestricted guys Seattle needs to make a decision on, including KJ Wright and Chris Carson. Where are your thoughts on Griffin and how the team values him and where he kind of ranks out there in the NFL? Pro Football Focus has him ranked 50th out of 121 overall corners. So he may be higher than in our minds than he actually is on the field. And
he was very inconsistent this year. Was not good early on in the season. Got hurt, missed some time, came back. Was actually really good for a stretch after he came back from his injury. Then started taking some risks and unnecessary ones and getting beat and was just really inconsistent. Had some really good plays followed by a couple times when he got beat when he shouldn't have. And I don't know. And is that coaching where they're asking to do different things? Is it just the fact that, he was playing with no trust in his safeties for the last couple of years and having a hard time adjusting to having safety play that he could trust again, and then finally doing so? I don't know. And the team's got to look into that, whatever. I think that, 50th out of, like average, I think is probably not incorrect for him. I do think that he's, a couple of years ago, or, not this year, but the year before, he was great. He was Pro Bowler. And I wouldn't have thought that we were in this position right now. We're like, he's an average player. No, he was a Pro Bowler a year ago. And then, what happened this year and why did the drop off?
And the secondary was horrible, historically horrible at the front of the season. I mean, the first 6-7 games were just absolutely atrocious, and then they kind of came on as a unit together, and the back end was part of that, and we'll see. I mean, I would think that the Seahawks would be, if they can get a number down into the $6.5 million range over 2 years, I would give him like a 2-year type of deal. I don't know that I would go out 4 years with him like $10 million a year. I don't know that the market is there for him on that, and that may be where he expects to be paid. But we'll have to see. See.
And it might be one of those things where he does get a chance to test the market and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. How about Quentin Dunbar? Here's an unrestricted guy, played horrible, had a horrible grade overall on the season.
I don't know if he had a good game. He had like one after he came back from an injury before he went out for the rest of the year.
Yeah. Certainly didn't see the player that he was in Washington.
No, yeah. I mean, he long injury history, never stays healthy. Was a good player a year ago.
Too, that off-season stuff had to have affected him mentally a little bit.
Yep. So my guess is he had that off-season stuff a year ago. Then he had a miserable year where he got hurt and really, struggled and had one of the worst cornerback games I have ever seen this year. And I can't imagine there's going to be much of a market for him. For him to come back on a prove-it deal, maybe $1.5 million, saying, "Hey, go reestablish your market value to where you were a couple of years ago. Come in, be hungry, be ready, and let's do this." And then go cash in a year. I could see him finding that appealing, and the Seahawks being willing to do that with him.
He's always had kind of that history thing. So with the injuries, so we'll see. Trey Flowers, he's got 1 year left on his deal. Right now, he's not the starter. He could be pressed into action though, depending on what happens with the cornerback room this year. I think Seattle would benefit with the limited cap space that they do have to spend some money in this area this year. Invest in a guy that can come in for you and shut down one side of the field. Would really help a Pete Carroll defense. Desmond King's out there, which we really liked. We chose what was it? Who did we choose? Malik McDowell, right? Instead of King. He went to Green Bay. I think the pick right before ours. That was King. One of those Kevin King, and it was just one of those deals. But he's 26 years old, hasn't really played up to his contract level. I don't know if Green Bay holds on to him or not. He is out there. And then, I mean, there's just a quite a bit of cornerbacks available in the free agent market this year. And I think Seattle may go do some shopping there, especially if Griffin doesn't sign. We're going to be out there trying to find a starter or two, possibly.
Well, if there's a bunch of cornerbacks out there, and we know that the league salary cap is shrinking, and a bunch of teams that aren't going to have any spending, or in fact, they're going to be cutting people just to get under the cap, you might be able to, like these numbers that we talk about are for normal years. Mm-hmm. This might be an instance where we see a bunch of short deals just because guys need to play. And no team can afford to pay anybody. So,
it's a patience game. We're all going to have to be patient. The team mostly, but us as fans as well. All right, and the back end of the roster, Nico Thorpe is unrestricted. Don't know if they'll value him to come back and play special teams or not. He's been injured the last couple of years. 2
straight years of not playing, been injured. Yes, he's the special teams captain, but 2 straight years of being paid not to play. I can't imagine that continue.
Jason Stanley, unrestricted, didn't really get an opportunity with us. Kind of a converted corner into converted wide receiver into a corner. Lyndon Stevens is a restricted free agent, exclusive rights. Gavin Heslop is a future deal, and Jordan Miller on future deal. And then our special teams guys, Jason Myers, Michael Dixon, Tyler Ott. Myers under a 2-year deal remaining. Dixon's got 1 year left, and then Ott's got a couple of years. So special teams look good.
Yep.
So that's it.
That's the roster.
That's the roster. Lots of opportunity for players to either step up, replacing starters or guys that have good rotation minutes. There's some opportunity out there to spend a little bit of money. We have to be smart in retaining the players that we really want. Do we want Chris Carson back, and what's it going to cost? The same with KJ Wright, Griffin, a few other players. What are your overall thoughts of where we sit right now?
I mean, obviously, I need to know where the salary cap's going to come in. If we just assume that it's that $178 million, this is a team that needs cap room. You're going to see Russell Wilson's contract reworked. You're going to see Carlos Dunlap, his contract reworked. Maybe Bobby Wagner, not for them to take pay cuts, but just to shift the salary cap. Yeah, just to shift the salary cap stuff into future years. With Dunlap, there might be a little bit of a pay cut involved, but it's really more about guaranteeing more money down the road and that kind of stuff for him. Same with Brown. In order to create that cap room, if the cap comes in at closer to 200, where it is this year, then the team has money to spend, and they're going to be frugal, and they're going to be careful. They're not just going to go blow it on on whatever, but I think that they have, they're not in a bad spot. I mean, yeah, you've got three guys you've got to make a decision on, which is Griffin, KJ, and Carson. And I think of that group, KJ is probably the one that comes back. And then it's like, okay, you've only got 4 draft picks. So how do you figure out how to replace all these guys with limited cap space and only 4 draft picks? So go figure it out.
So does that lend you to think that they would be bigger players in the lower end of the free agent market, guys on minimum deals, just to bring in for bodies and so forth, or do you think that they turn to kind of the undrafted route to fill out their roster, especially the 90-man roster for camps and so forth?
Yeah, there's
so many unknowns out there, too.
Because of the fact that the salary cap's coming down, and there's so many teams that are so far over the cap that they're going to be at like 35 or 40 players under contract in order just to get under the cap to start the league year, and then they still have more work to do and all of that kind of stuff. You're going to see the free agent market being really slow this year. There's only a couple of teams with a lot of cap space. And so I could see it being a slow year for the free agent market and prices coming down and guys not getting what they want. And the last time there was a situation like this, the Seahawks waited it out and got Cliff Averill and Michael Bennett on the cheap. And I could see them trying to manipulate the situation and maybe getting, waiting it out, getting Griffin to come back on a 1-year deal, Dunlap to come back on a 1-year deal, or Kevin King to come in on a 1 or 2 year deal, and getting guys significantly cheaper than we would expect them to, because there's just not the market out there that there normally would be.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Wow. Lots to look forward to, lots to talk about as we move forward through all this. Next week, we've got a great show. I probably should have mentioned that straight up at the beginning of the show. We've got a special guest, Dana O'Gorman's rejoining us as a guest, and we are diving into the GM and coaches show, where we'll do some evaluations. Hopefully, we've maybe got a new offensive coordinator to take a look at and dive into a little bit and find out what that individual would bring to the team. That would be fun to talk about. So
what are we going to do when 5 minutes after we wrap this up, the Seahawks hire an offensive coordinator? Are we going to jump back in and do another
we should
opening or what?
Or what? Yeah. Who knows, right? Who knows? Sometimes that happens. It's just crazy. All right. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. I'm at NWC Hawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook on Twitter. Seahawksplaybook.com has all the shows, and your favorite podcast app is where you want to go to get your subscription and get your feed loaded with our new show every week. So until next time,
go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Phil is at NWCHawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.